Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Smart and Snark podcast, where real software engineers and real software managers discuss real software. Today, if you can't tell, we are having a special Tour de France episode. On this podcast, I have my worst dressed coworker in the world, Mr. Matt Jaffe. Jaffe is a world-renowned computer scientist and astrophysicist. His role here is to try to educate us all on the value of technology and ultimately why should we submit to its authority. Mr. Matt Jaffe, did you know the Tour de France is going on right now?
Man, you got a lot of nerve calling me worst dressed in that getup. Anyway,
So, do you know the Tour de France is going on now, Mr. Matt Jaffe?
I do now.
You do now. Do you not like the Tour de France?
There's a lot of things in this world that I could follow, and I just don't have time to follow all of them.
That's kind of like the classic American persona. If it's not about you, what is it about? Are you a classic American?
I am definitely a classic American.
All right, I can get behind that. All right. So today we have season 0, episode 9, from ER lifesaver to hacker. Meet David Kagan. David, welcome to the show today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Do you know why you're here?
Judging by the titles, to talk about my transition from being an ER nurse to software engineering.
Well, I got a note today that Jaffe is going to podcast jail. Apparently, he is that bad that folks are on their way now to take him up. And I needed another host. So Jaffe will be out of the picture, and you're coming in. I mean, I really, there was no one really else to choose. And, being better than Jaffe at something like this is not that hard. Jaffe, are you going to be open the front door for them, or are you going to make them break in the door, or what?
Well, given that nobody else knows how to run the software, I think you're pretty much screwed if somebody does come to pick me up.
Typical software engineer. Nobody can figure this out. This is so hard. 8-year-old enters the room. Come on. All right. So yes, David, ER lifesaver to hacker. So David, you're here today to tell a pretty cool story. So I don't want to speak necessarily for you. I'll open it up for a few maybe comments by you. But you were a nurse at a point in time. You decided to make a career change from nurse to software engineer. At I don't want to say at a later stage in life, because you're definitely much younger than Jaffe there. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of get into some questions, and maybe Jaffe will have something insightful to say.
Yeah, so my academic career has been kind of topsy-turvy. I have actually 2 degrees. My first one was in biology, and that was at my normal 4-year degree that I did up in Canada, actually. 2 years after that is when I decided to go into nursing. And so I went through an accelerated 1-year bachelor's degree to become a nurse. And then after that, worked for 3 years as a nurse.
What kind of nurse were you?
I worked in 2 different positions. I primarily was in the emergency room. I was an ER nurse at Yale New Haven Hospital. And after that, when I knew I wanted to make the jump into software engineering, I left the ER world and joined the outpatient world.
Jaffe, you ever been to the ER?
I don't think so, actually. I typically rely on my mutant healing powers to get me through most injuries.
Right. So David, I don't know if I told you this, but my wife worked at Johns Hopkins Hospital for a while, and all everyone wanted to talk about was did a patient throw feces at you today? So my question to you, in your career as a nurse, did a patient ever throw feces at you?
Not throw, but just defecated on the ground, peed on the ground. I had to clean it up. Yeah.
Now that can happen accidentally. I remember that. Oh, I won't tell that story, Jaffe. Never mind. Don't worry about that. So as a nurse, what was your day to day like? I mean, is it like everything that we see on ER and I don't know, all of those nursing shows that are out there?
So it's really funny. My best friend is an ER doctor, and he said that out of all the TV shows out there, the most realistic medical TV show is actually Scrubs, which I think is hilarious. My day to
Wait,
day
wait,
most
wait. You think Scrubs is hilarious, or that fact is hilarious?
that fact is hilarious. I mean, Scrubs is also really funny.
Agree.
My day to day was interesting as a nurse because as a nurse I would only work 3 days a week, but those days were 12-hour shifts. The shifts that I worked were either 11 a to 11 p.m. or 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. Those were the hours that I worked. Uh, on a given day, I would get to work and get report from the shift that I was taking over, take a look at my assignment, continue doing tasks. If I was lucky, I would have a break in doing tasks and be able to take a lunch. Not always a uh, not always a given, but if you work hard enough and able to create a break for yourself, then you get a lunch break.
So Jaffe, I don't know if you were paying attention there, but basically those 12-hour days you've been working 6 days a week, you basically like a double nurse is really what you are.
Well, what can I say? Actually, I was thinking my schedule is more like 6 to 7 days a week. Well, really, like probably like 14 days a week, but 3 hour shifts. Like like 3 hours here, 3 hours there, just all over the place.
Aren't you like an astrophysicist and you're mathing like a nurse is really what it seems like. I can't pick up.
I hope nurses math better than that.
We have computers for that.
Not to derail your script, Jason, but what I'm really interested in here is like, at what point, David, were you like, how did you decide you wanted to become a software engineer? Like, when did that happen?
Yeah, so there was a accumulation of things that really sort of triggered that. When I was at Queen's University, my first university stint, I took an intro to programming class as like an elective. That was done in MATLAB, so that was always fun. And something about that really, really clicked with me. It was like the thought process of like you needing to really step things out one step at a time. You can't make like logical jumps that humans normally do in their head. And for some reason, that really clicked with me, and I really enjoyed it. And then from nursing, I got really burnt out working in the ER for about 2.5 years.
Remind us what years those were.
When I was working as a nurse,
Yeah,
I
what years were those?
started February 2019 and stopped May 2022.
What
as an ER
happened that
nurse.
could have burnt you out in that time frame?
So funny enough, when COVID was at its height, the ER was in a very lovely place. And by lovely, meaning the patients were very sick, but you wouldn't get the extra bloat from the population coming in. The burnout came in while COVID was like peaking around, or not really peaking, but like kind of hovering around, and the volume was picking back up. That's when the burnout really happened. And so burnout, thinking back to that intro to programming class that I took in university, I was like, oh, I did really enjoy that. Let me kind of visit that on my own time and see if it's something that I still enjoy. So I took some like self-taught classes on like Code Academy just to see if it's something that I really enjoyed. And it is. And so I went down that path.
So it was more like I want to get out of nursing and find something. It wasn't, I was really thinking about software all day and wow, I should really be doing that.
Yeah, it was more of like for my own health and sanity, I needed to get out of nursing.
And your first choice was software?
My first choice was software.
Huh. So when it comes to nursing, sorry, Jaffe, I'm interested in the nursing side. My mom was a nurse. I was raised by a nurse. My wife works in the hospital, so I know I'm very interested in all this stuff. David, how would you describe your bedside manner? Were you one of those like mean, no nonsense nurses, or were you all friendly and nice and made life easy for people?
I was friendly, nice, but I certainly set boundaries. Like I wouldn't cater to your every well. I was not your waiter. Um, but I would still do things that needed to be done and do it in a friendly manner. Wearing a mask during COVID, oh, lifesaver. I can hide all of my facial expressions. I can hide my eye rollings. I can hide everything. I can like laugh underneath and no one would ever know.
Do you have cold hands?
When I'm nervous, I do. When I'm not, no.
Okay. And spend a moment here and tell us about your meanest patient. Who was the meanest patient you ever had?
The meanest patient, like verbally.
Your go here.
Well,
No. Physically, for sure.
so in the ER, you come across pretty much everything. So I've had patients where I've needed 7 security guards to pin them down, to medicate them, to put them to sleep.
7. Did you count them? Like, how did you know it was 7?
Because we have 7 security guards in the emergency room.
And it took all Billy, Bob, Joe, Evan, Mark.
Oh yeah, they're absolutely fantastic.
Was that really their names? Did I just get
Oh
that?
no. No, but the security guards in the ER are phenomenal.
Okay. So meanest patient, what happened?
Pinned him down, put him in restraints, medicated them, slept like a baby in 10 minutes.
Why were they mad? Was it because of your cold hands? Was it because, you
No, they're high.
divided by 0 on the mat? Oh, they are high?
Yeah.
That's it? Oh, okay. So it's just Breaking Bad or something?
Pretty much.
Mm.
I got like kicked in the head by like an altered grandmother at some point. Probably a UTI, because it always is. Yeah, no one was ever like super rude. If they were rude, I would just leave.
So when I'm in a meeting and Jaffe's going on one of his tirades, I should just leave? That's your recommendation?
Yeah, just leave the situation. Nothing bad can happen from that.
Please do.
All right, so you're getting burned out. I need to find an escape. You remembered that one coding class you had on Ada 83 that you loved, and you're like, okay, I'm ready to do this. Like I'm trying to envision me going, okay, I've clearly accomplished software. I'm an expert in it, and now I need something else, and I'm gonna go be what, like an astrophysicist or something. I took the little, I don't know, placement exams, whatever they are. Like, how do you approach your? I mean, did you have a partner? Like, was there somebody you had to like talk to, or is it just you and you just jumped? Like, how do you actually make that jump? For me, father, 3, all getting ready to enter college. Clearly, I'm being facetious with all my comments here. Like, how do you make that jump? That feels very, for the folks listening in, I mean, it feels like that could be a really big decision. You could go lots of different ways. Kind of walk me through like that moment of truth where you're like, okay, I'm doing this.
Yeah, it certainly was not an easy decision to make. It required a lot of talking with girlfriend and fiance, now wife, at the time, to really make the jump, because there's a lot of financial thought that needed to get put into this decision as well. Um, so we ended up at the point where we were in a stable enough financial place where I could leave my job and becoming a focus on becoming a software engineer full time. And again, that really wasn't an easy decision. The path wasn't easy, but I was getting really burnt out. It was crossing over to home, and something just needed to be done for the sake of the relationship.
So you've decided to make that plunge. You're probably looking for some place to get trained. How come you didn't go to Jaffe's Jokester Classic 101? I mean, why didn't you go there for your training?
I mean, I could have, but look at where Jaffe is now.
Wait, I'm sorry. I don't know. What is? When
Yeah,
did
it was
you
way
go
over
where?
your head, buddy. Way over your head. It was actually funny, so you wouldn't have gotten it. So okay, so how does someone take the plunge? How does somebody go, okay, How did you pick one out? Which one did you choose? Would you recommend them? Were they horrible?
Yeah, so going into software, or the beauty about going into software is it's nice to have a university degree, but you don't actually need one. So I already had two bachelor's degrees. I didn't really want to go into school. That was a bigger financial setback as well. So what I did was actually my wife's former coworkers made a similar jump from less of a jump, but from being like a systems engineer to a software engineer, and they went through this boot camp. Um, and they were like, "Yeah, the boot camp that I went to wasn't really good, but I've heard that this boot camp, the one that I eventually ended up going to, was a really, really good one." And so I did the things I needed to do to enroll in that sort of boot camp, and did that.
What did you need to do? I'm wondering. I want to make sure I
Oh,
can pass the
sure.
exams.
Yeah. So the boot camp that I went to is called Codesmith. Um, Codesmith is a boot camp where you actually have to pass like a technical interview to get into. And so what they do to prepare students for that is they have two classes that are open to the public. Um, the boot camp is primarily focused on web dev, so it's all JavaScript focused. Um, so there's a JavaScript for beginners and like a JavaScript's the hard parts sort of course, a 2-part course that goes along with it. And so I took those, I did well in those, and I was able to pass my technical interview to get enrolled.
I don't know, Jaffe. I think you should go undercover for one of these. You should pose as a nurse and like go to one of these and see like how bad you do in the introductory class.
Yeah, I my JavaScript's a little rusty. I don't think I'm up for that.
I mean, we could have a whole podcast on why JavaScript really isn't a programming language, but look, don't get me started.
That's just patently false. But anyway,
It was developed in 7 days, so
So, all right. So you go into your journey of your training. Was it like intense? I mean, I've heard. I mean, you hear stories as an interviewer, right? Because as an interviewer, Jeff, you probably have had the same experience. Like, there's lots of folks who are moving from one um, field to another, and because the last 2 years, the software industry, engineering industry in general, really had a big boom. It's since contracted some, but for me, I saw a lot of folks that went to different academies. There were obviously lots of different skill sets, but I don't know. Kind of walk us through how hard or easy was it?
yeah, the getting into Codesmith, I mean, the two courses beforehand were pretty straightforward. They're classes that you take like on the weekends or in the evenings, 2 to 3 times a week for like 2 or 3 weeks. It wasn't that intense, but if you get into the boot camp itself, it's about 3 months of 70 hours a week, um, like Monday through Friday, like 9 to 8, Saturday 9 to 4:30, um, and you're just sort of during that time just like plugging along at that point coding in JavaScript fundamentals, uh, mostly geared towards JavaScript and like web dev sort of things, because again that's what the bootcamp was focused on. But it certainly was not easy. The pace that the program set was very rapid, and they kind of expect you to fall behind and kind of learn a bit on your own, in the times that they allot you to.
I don't know, Jaffe.
so
What do you think? Could we pass something like that?
well, I'm curious. Was it like 70 hours a week? Like, how much of that was instruction, and how much was like doing just working on like homework and stuff?
I would probably say about 25 to 30% of it was instruction. The way that Codesmith teaches is very much what they call hard learning. And what that means is they give you a task with minimal instructions, and it's up to you to sort of read through the docs, figure out how it's done, and then attempt to implement it yourself.
That's really interesting. I didn't learn that probably for almost close to 10 years, maybe 8 years. I don't want to say I was spoon fed, but it wasn't as open as it was. And like basically, make a long story short, it's teaching you how to learn because there's no one ever knows software, like software. You have to learn how to go figure out different things, whether it's a new language or a new API or a new framework. So that sounds super valuable.
Yeah, like for example, one of the things that they were is like make a make a calendar on this web page using HTML and CSS, and then it's up to you to figure out, oh, like is Flexbox better than Grid for this? How do I implement them? How do I add borders? Like most of the intricate part of building it is up to you to learn.
Yeah, this is what I generally refer to as the like beating your head against a wall part of programming, and it's honestly probably the most valuable skill to learn, to just like keep beating your head against the wall until you figure the thing out. Because that's, I mean, I don't know about you, David, but that's still my day to day. Is just a lot of that. Like, all right, just keep plugging away at this problem until I figure out what it is.
So David, was there any material? I mean, I'm a manager, so not on the technical side. Is there any material on management, like how to put up with and deal with pretentious engineers? I mean, that would be a really valuable trait that I could really use, especially like right now.
In Codesmith, no, it was mostly focused on just technical things.
Right.
How much did you pay for the privilege of getting beaten up for 70 hours a week for 3 months?
So when I said that making this plunge was a financial decision as part of a sanity decision, it was not cheap. It was cheaper than going back to university for like a year or two to get a degree, but it was still not cheap. It was 5 figures.
Yeah, so definitely something you have to carefully plan for if you want
Five
to
figures is real money. That's
Yeah,
real money.
that again, that's part of the weight of the decision to finally make the switch.
Yeah, I think the message here is pretty clear. Jaffe, we're in the wrong business. We got to start teaching JavaScript.
apparently.
Awesome. So is software what you expected, David? I mean, you've what's it been like 8 months, 6, 8 months, something like that?
I started at Featurebase in January, so it's been about 6 7 months so far, and I would say so. The learning curve is a lot steeper than I thought it was going to be. Um, but from my nursing background, I've always been very good at asking questions and asking a lot of questions. Uh, I'm pretty sure Jaffe can attest to that, me bothering him a whole lot. Um,
Great questions.
but it, yeah, I guess the answer would be yeah. It is kind of what I expected.
So I think the question that every software engineer, new software engineer, would want me to ask you, and hopefully you can answer the best you can, is do you feel a good bit, or do you feel any like imposter syndrome? Do you come into work every day and look around where people have degrees and been doing it for years, and you go, "What am I doing here?" Have you had those feelings? Are they hard to navigate? And where I'm going with this is, we've got listeners who are going to be interested in kind of how you made this jump because that's what they want to do. What advice would you give them for navigating that?
I would say definitely. Imposter syndrome is something that is consciously in my thoughts. Um, the way that I combat it is not comparing myself to others, but comparing myself to like me a month ago or me 2 months ago and seeing how far I've grown that way. I've also been okay with me not knowing everything. That's kind of the viewpoint that I took on as a nurse as well, where I think going from nursing to software engineering is not super difficult because there's actually a lot of similarities. One of them being is in both fields you will never know everything, and being comfortable with that sort of knowledge and just not being afraid to ask dumb questions and just ask questions because you don't know. Even if the answer is like, oh yeah, that's part of the code that's like right there on line 12. Um, that's just got to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'll. It was a little bit of a loaded question because I can't. I don't want to speak for Jaffe, but for me, I always have had it in my career, and I would encourage everybody to have those feelings because it's something that will drive you, right? The
If
moment that you get complacent, go ahead.
if you don't have imposter syndrome, you might be a psychopath. Like I still feel that way sometimes. It's just like you said, David. There's so much to know. Every time you dive into anything, any new space, it's just like, oh man, like, am I supposed to be here? Like surely there's someone who can do this better. um and there may be, but they're not available right now. It's up to you to figure it out.
So David, other than Jaffe, is there anything about software you don't like?
Hmm, that is a good question. I think the part that I don't like is probably the communication aspect could always just be better. If we're talking specifically about feature base, um, the constant updates to our product, and constantly changing like the different like make commands that we use, um, changes fairly rapidly that one can get out of date really quickly. Um, and just like the another part is just the learning curve is just so steep. Like I got hired in January, and before then, I didn't know anything about Go. I didn't know anything about Terraform. I didn't know anything about a lot of the tech stack, and so the learning curve to get acquainted with all that stuff was really steep.
Jaffe, what don't you like about software? Other than management and process and estimates and delivering and no,
um I guess at this point I get frustrated with, like, when stuff when stuff is like over designed. I feel like designing your code, there's a lot of things that are like best practices that are not, in my opinion. It's like we're going to do this right. We're going to plan this out so it's easy to change in the future, and it's almost always a trap to do that, I feel like. And it just makes the code, it usually makes the code harder to change because there's like some dimension of change you didn't plan for, and suddenly you got to like redo your whole framework and not just the actual code that does stuff. um, I think yeah, stuff being slow is the most frustrating part for me, whether it's because the code is hard to modify or because CI takes a long time to run, or whatever. um, Luckily these are all things that can be improved, but it just takes time.
yeah. When I think about the question, um, I want to answer. And look, I get how this is going to sound. It is an absolutely curmudgeon whine what I'm about to say. All right, I get it. But software nowadays, it's very fast. Like not fast in your sense. Like it's too. I'll go as far as to say it's too easy to write software. It is too easy to write garbage software. It's too. It's like sometimes it feels like it's written to be thrown away. And I know I'm going off the deep end here, but when I started many years ago, we were flying planes and guiding missiles, and you don't throw that stuff away. That stays around a long time. Everything now is so fast, and even we had an episode, Jaffe, about having AI bots write it for us, and I worry about the culture around that because so you like when I was taught, it's like you write 10 lines of software a day, Jeff. You're probably writing 600 lines of software a day. It's just software is like we use it to drive cars now, like medical devices. I worry that we're software is going to get to a place where it's just the culture of it is going to be horrible. So sorry for going off the deep end there, and yes, get off my grass.
It's very market driven, though. Like it just turns out the best way to make progress and get things done is to move fast and then fix things in in later versions. And because you have to do stuff to learn what you need to do. And so the people that move fast are the people that are winning in the market. And that's true for most fields, but not all. If you're launching rockets, yeah, the cost dynamics are different, right? Because a small bug in the software can cost millions very quickly. But if you're shipping an email app, like, you just get it out there. You don't spend months and months of testing because that costs millions. You get it out there, and when there's bugs, you fix them, and that turns out to be the most efficient way to do it. I don't think I agree. It's like it doesn't feel good, to ship something you're not totally confident in, but I think it's totally market driven.
We should probably have an episode on this because, I mean, sure, there are times where it's valuable, but I think more often than not, the people who suffer are the consumers. So if you look at Experian, if you look at SolarWinds, if you look at all of these companies that they try to get out fast and they have security vulnerabilities or some problems, and 250 million U.S. residents' social security information gets leaked, right? And then what? I get a check over here for 47 cents. Is that what my personal data is worth? And then there was no penalty, right? There was no penalty for that crappy software. Anyway, probably a much longer episode. Maybe we should talk about that. We can invite your bot.
I think especially in the AI space, that's also true because like every week you hear a new AI company coming out with the new latest and greatest whatever AI product.
Well, feature, but no. So the next is this is I'm gonna go off on a chance here. Can you see if we can get a good answer? Can you compare and contrast when you think about a careers in nursing and software? Are there any similarities? Are there any differences? Like you have now day-to-days in both. Like what can you tell us about having both of those careers?
So there are a lot of similarities and the obvious differences. Like as a nurse, I was very active. I was on my feet the whole time. Nursing is a very physical job. And the days that I had off, I was physically and mentally exhausted. Uh, that's very different to software, where at the end of the day, my brain is just kind of mush, but physically I'm doing okay. But the similarities when it comes to software and nursing are the communication, the teamwork, and the as I said before, the fact that no matter what, you will never know everything. There are many different ways to write code, as if like there's many different ways to diagnose a medical problem. Um, so getting comfortable with that is something that I was very familiar with going from nursing to software. Um, and the teamwork where since a whole team is working on a singular product, everyone kind of needs to be on the same page when it comes to what they're doing and why, and oh, this change is going to affect this. Obviously, versioning software such as like Git has made that quite easy.
Jeffy, what are you doing? What are you doing? This isn't the end. What are you doing? You're not rolling us back. What are you? Are you on mute now? All right, David, we got to ignore that guy. He has no idea what he's doing. Can you
Sorry,
please finish?
hitting buttons.
Um, but yeah, the teamwork and the communication aspect is really really important because like if I go to Jaffe with the question, I need to be able to adequately communicate the problem I'm having and the stuff that I have done um, to attempt to fix the problem that has not worked. And so that's very similar to when I'm talking with a doctor about a patient. You can say like, "Hey, the patient's complaining about this. We've done this so far. What do you want to do next?"
So we've talked about your worst day as a nurse. You didn't have any feces thrown at you, which was kind of disappointing because those are always the best stories. But tell us about your worst day as a software developer. I mean, other than fixing Jaffe's bad bugs and his bad hair, and what has been your worst day as a software developer?
Huh. My worst day as a software developer. I don't think I've really had a worse day. I think that could probably just be classified as a day where I've just asked really bad questions over and over again, um, from just a lack of understanding, but bad questions nonetheless. I think, yeah, it's really hard to classify a bad day as a software engineer. It's not like that I worked at GitLab and deleted a prod database or anything.
So, so Jaffe, that was probably the worst answer we've heard today. Clearly, David is not getting enough responsibility and enough risk. I mean, I could rattle off probably half a dozen like horrible, no good, very bad days where I even responding to a customer and saying something negative about a customer and accidentally having their email on it, bringing down production. I mean, I could probably go find 20 of those. And this gentleman right here, who by the way is probably an expert in being under pressure, right, having to save lives and CPRs and stuff. I mean, what about you, Jaffe? We want to talk about one of your worst days,
Oh man,
other than today.
right. the uh, the worst. I don't know. So you have these days where like you work all day, and it's like 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You're getting tired, and then something horrible happens. Like you go into like a customer Slack channel, and they're like, "Oh, our database is down, and we're losing data and customers, whatever it is," and then you end up, up until 8 or 9 p.m. or whatever, trying to fix the problem. Um, but I'm kind of, I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit of a masochist because I end up actually liking those days because you get the adrenaline rush, and you go in and um, you. I'm doing something right now. Unbelievable, unbelievable.
Today's the worst day.
uh, you get the adrenaline rush, and you dive in, fix the problem, and if you do fix it, that feels pretty good. But that initial sinking feeling when you see that message when you're already like tired and running out of steam is pretty rough.
I think part of my lack of answer to that question just comes from ignorance, where I just don't have the knowledge to make those sort of influences yet.
We'll fix that. It was funny. I was listening. I kind of tuned out as Jaffe was rambling there, and I got to thinking maybe not days but moments, and it was interesting. Where my mind went to was a couple of times where I was emotional and unkind to a teammate, and I can think of two off the top of my head. And I look back and go, yeah. And this wasn't a feature base, but I think those are good learning experiences because as bad as the day you may be having, like doesn't mean that you can kind of treat your teammates who are just there to work with you in a negative way. So
I'm sorry. Did you say you could only think of two
one, two. Well, those are the ones that came to mind. I mean, this was a
in the
long.
last 5 minutes?
Did you ramble that long? So anyway, my point of sharing that is for folks listening, right? Those moments will happen, and David, you will make a mistake, and tell Jaffe what you really think of them, and yeah. Um,
So, like, when I think of really bad mistakes, I've had nursing coworkers like accidentally put people into cardiac arrest. And like, that's obviously a big mistake. I don't think anything here can really match that. Um, but yeah, if I somehow delete a production database, then you'll know that I will
but
now
have you
have something
seen
to talk
Jaffe's
to.
estimates? I mean, putting someone in cardiac arrest and being off an estimate by 370,000%. I mean, they're not that far off.
I was gonna say hold my beer, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in all honesty, yeah, it's hard to match that.
So what? Closing up here is your kind of migration over to the new role. So
Hang on before you close up. Maybe give me a chance to get a word in edgewise, because what I want to know, David, is what kind of developer did you want to be initially, and what kind of developer do you want to be now?
So I guess the short answer to that one is a good one. The long answer is it's very hard for me to answer that question because I went into the software engineering field from the view of a web developer, and the work that I'm doing here now is very much back end building a database in the cloud. And so those are two dramatically different things in software, and the different things you can do with software are pretty much infinite. So I can't answer that question because I haven't experienced enough of software as it is to really answer it.
But you've experienced a lot now, right? You've done some front end stuff, some web stuff. You've done deep back end stuff. You've done some like ops stuff, messing around with Terraform. I mean, what are you drawn to the most? What do you like the best?
I really do like the back end stuff, knowing how things work underneath the hood. I find that very interesting. And so I guess in the future, I would just like to get more knowledgeable and proficient at that.
I don't know whether to be upset or grateful, but neither of you are mentioning anything about, oh, I want to get into management.
I mean, I left nursing because I hate people. So
I already got into management. We know how that went.
So, so David, someone's listening in here, and they're like, I'm going to do this too. What advice do you have for them?
so I would be 100% sure that this is in fact something that you do want to do. I would do some learning on your own. Make sure that writing code is enjoyable to you. I would take some courses to, again, just to solidify that, and again, be in a spot where you can either make the jump working full time or be in a safe enough spot in which you can do what I did and leave the job and go on. Whether that be if you want to go to a university and go that route, or go the route that I did and take a boot camp. Just make sure that it is something that you want to do. One of the things that uh, I experienced after I graduated from my boot camp that you kind of touched on is that the software engineering field is booming, but finding a job as a software engineer is very hard. Um, so just be prepared.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. So, in finding a job, like, how important was it, making sure that your new boss is completely awesome, a badass who everybody loves?
Oh, 100%. Super important.
In all seriousness, I think that's a really good question. I mean, was it? I imagine it was daunting, right? Because you've got to doubly prove yourself. You don't have experience. You don't. I mean, and then there's coding challenges, and making like how do you? I think I had about a dozen folks that I interviewed that went through academies, and I don't want to make claims about anybody or any academies or anything like that, but there was only really one person that I would have considered hiring, and that was you. But uh, you know, if you do the math on there, it was hard. I don't know if that's me, my standards, but it's going to be. It has to be daunting.
It is very daunting. I would say the hardest part is just getting rejection after rejection after rejection, applying to hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs that I've heard stories from. Um, the interview process itself is really exciting because then one, you didn't get a rejection, which is great. Um, and two, it's finally a chance for you to prove yourself and like really put your best foot forward. Um, I am lucky that I guess I did well enough on my technical interview to go through the non-technical interviews, and that's really where someone from my background really tries to put their best foot forward and really prove themselves. Because not all my skills are going to be uh, technical, but more of those soft skills that I can bring in from my previous career. So I really tried to highlight those.
Yeah, to any hiring managers out there, what impressed me about David's situation was that, he had a career. Like, he clearly was hireable. He was not some idiot who never showed up for his job. Like, it's much different to have a college grad in a degree and then they go without any experience and go to academy, right? So, for you, in my opinion, David, it was a little bit different because you had a career. You clearly were established. And I think that puts you on more firmer grounding. And there are folks like that. But I don't know, Jaffe. I mean, I would be pretty afraid today thinking about a career change, especially into something like a technical field. No, really because I'm incompetent, but mainly because I think it would be kind of really hard work. You ever thought about a career change, Jaffe?
Um, I mean, what else would I do? Like
Not marketing, not hair design, not
hair design.
modeling, not interior design, not. I mean, there's lots of things I can see that you wouldn't be good at.
Yeah, I feel like I would open a food truck or something, like make breakfast sandwiches. Um, yeah, obviously a career change within technology, like doing some other kind of software engineering. I feel like that would be pretty straightforward. But um, beyond that, I mean, like I can't imagine like going into like civil engineering or something like that. That's just seems like a bridge too far.
Yeah, the to kind of emphasize how difficult the job application process was. I was still in nursing school, didn't pass my national boards, and was essentially still offered a job. Uh, I pretty much, as soon as I graduated, within a month, I was working full time. And I was, not to toot my own horn, I was a pretty darn good nurse. People would come to me for help. I would tell doctors what to do. Like I was established in the emergency room and making the swap where I had to apply to hundreds of jobs to hopefully go somewhere where that I wanted to was really, really difficult.
I think I don't want to get this is going to sound vain, but on average, I would imagine the software industry and technical industries in general, the pay is going to be more, if not significantly more, than many other industries, deservingly or not. So for folks who move, folks who are in technology and want to go do other things, there's probably a financial implication to that.
That was certainly a thought that I had making the swap, but it certainly wasn't a driving factor. It was more like, let's fix my sanity. Let's do something just different. Um, the pay is nice. Not gonna say it's not, but that certainly wasn't the sole reason why I made the jump.
Taking ownership of your success. So Jaffe, I know you've got like 50 more questions to ask. I really only have one final question, David, for you, which is, who would it be easier to draw blood from, me or Jaffe?
Both of you would be easy.
Wait,
So
wait, wait. Do you mean draw blood like first blood in a fight, or like taking blood out of a vein?
we're gonna have to mute him, David. So look, I want you to know that my mother, rest in peace, told me as a nurse that I had amazing veins. That my veins for drawing blood are fantastic. I just want to put that out there so you can carefully consider your answer for who can draw blood.
It was one of my strong points as a nurse was the phlebotomy aspect of it because I would do it so often. People would come to me for help with blood draws.
I'm actually, despite what you may think, I'm actually pretty tough because I tend to pass out when getting blood drawn.
I donated as a poor college student. I donated plasma in college, and they used a 10 gauge needle. David, I don't know if you had any of those. Those were those big ones, and those were intimidating.
They are very scared, very scary.
All right, so Jaffe, any other thoughts? Any other questions for our man of the hour, ER hacker, David?
So I figured out what my next career is going to be. I think I just want to be like a handyman, just like doing odd jobs, fixing stuff. I feel like I would
You're
really
much better
like
at
that.
breaking stuff, man.
Yeah, well, you can't fix anything if you don't break it. That's what I always say.
So, David, thank you very much for coming on the show today. Anything else you'd like to share with folks? Other thoughts, musings, observations about moving from the world of, what did you call it, hating people, to clearly now loving people, especially your boss?
No, I think the questions that you asked really covered the whole gamut of the whole process. So yeah, no, really nothing to add.
All right, folks, thanks for tuning in. Jaffe, you want to close us out here properly this
Yeah.
time?
Thanks for that. That was the intro music. Sorry. Um, Thanks for listening, everyone. If you have any questions about the show, you can send us an email, smartandsnark@gmail.com, Twitter @smartsnarkcast, and on all the major podcast platforms, Smart and Snark. Thanks a lot.
Vive la France, Peter Sagan.
Take care, guys.
Ciao.